That feeling of being trapped in life, at your job, in your relationship, in your own mind, might seem like a modern problem, but psychologist Carl Jung discovered it reveals something far more fundamental about human nature. Through decades of treating patients and exploring his own psyche, Jung found that this sensation of being stuck isn't just about external circumstance. It's actually a signal from our unconscious mind, telling us something profound about who we really are. Jung noticed a fascinating pattern. Often the people who felt most trapped were living what looked like perfectly good lives. They had stable jobs, decent relationships, and no obvious problem. Yet inside, they felt like they were suffocated. One of his most memorable patients was a successful businessman who had everything society said should make him happy: wealth, status, family, but felt so trapped he couldn't even explain why. Through working with Jung, this man discovered he had spent his entire life building a cage of other people's expectations. What made Jung's insight so revolutionary was that he saw feeling trapped not as a problem to fix, but as a message to decode. When we feel stuck, it's often because we're living in conflict with parts of ourselves we've never acknowledged, like a CEO who secretly dreams of being an artist, or a social media influencer who craves solitude but keeps posting because that's what everyone expects. Jung found that the stronger we feel trapped, the more important the message usually is. This matters now more than ever, because we live in a world that's constantly telling us how to escape these feelings through new jobs, relationships, or the latest self-help trend. But Jung's research showed that trying to escape the feeling of being trapped often just builds a bigger cage. The real key to freedom, he discovered, lies in understanding why we feel trapped in the first place. If we don't understand Jung's insights about feeling trapped, we risk mistaking the symptoms for the cure in an age of quick-fix solutions and surface-level self-help. Jung saw this pattern repeating throughout history, people trying to escape their inner prisons by changing everything on the outside, only to find themselves feeling even more confined than before. Take social media for Jung would have seen our constant scrolling and posting as a modern expression of what he called mass psychology, where we try to escape our inner emptiness by copying what everyone else is doing. When we feel trapped, we often look at others' lives for solutions. We think, if I just had their job, their relationship, their lifestyle, I'd feel free. But Jung found that this kind of thinking actually deepens the trap. He discovered this truth through a shocking case: a woman who had changed jobs 7 times in 3 years, moved cities twice, and ended 3 relationships, all because she felt trapped. Each change gave her temporary relief, but the feeling always came back stronger. Why? Because she was running from something inside herself, not her external circumstances. Jung's warning is crystal clear for our times. The more we try to escape feeling trapped through external changes without understanding the inner message, the more trapped we'll ultimately become. It's like trying to cure a headache by changing your hat. You might feel better for a moment, but you haven't addressed the real cause. Was born in 1875 in a small Swiss village, and from his earliest days, he lived in 2 worlds. His father was a poor rural pastor struggling with religious doubts, while his mother had unpredictable mood swings that would leave young Carl terrified. But instead of breaking him, this unstable childhood led Jung to make a fascinating discovery. He developed 2 distinct personalities. By day, he was personality number 1, a normal Swiss schoolboy. But in private, he became personality 2, someone who felt ancient and connected to mysterious forces. These early experiences weren't just childhood games. They planted the seeds for his understanding of why people feel trapped. At university, Jung chose to study medicine, even though it didn't fully interest him. Sound familiar? Like many of us, he followed the sensible path. But everything changed when he discovered psychiatry. Finally, here was a field that let him explore the mysterious inner world he'd known since childhood. Then came the turning point that would reshape everything we know about feeling stuck: Jung's famous break with Sigmund Freud. They had worked closely together for 6 years, with Freud seeing Jung as his successor. But Jung couldn't accept Freud's view that all psychological problems came from repressed sexual desires. He saw something deeper, a spiritual hunger that no amount of psychological analysis could satisfy. After splitting with Freud in 1913, Jung went through what he called his confrontation with the unconscious. He started having intense dreams and visions. Instead of dismissing them as crazy, he did something revolutionary. He dove right in. For 6 years, he spent time each day drawing, writing, and exploring these visions. What he discovered during this period would become the foundation for understanding why we feel trapped. The most crucial insight came when Jung realized that feeling trapped isn't a malfunction. It's actually our psyche's way of forcing us to grow. He saw this clearly in his own life. Breaking with Freud had felt terrifying, like stepping off a cliff. But by facing that fear instead of running from it, he found his true path. This personal experience became the blueprint for his understanding of how we can transform our own feelings of being trapped into doorways to freedom. Jung discovered 3 core ideas that explain why we feel trapped and, more importantly, how we can break free. The first is what he called the persona, but it's not what you think. Imagine your persona like a spacesuit you wear to survive in society. We all have one. The professional version of yourself at work, the perfect parent face you show at school meetings, or the carefully curated social media presence you maintain. Jung found that many people feel trapped because they've become so good at wearing their spacesuit that they've forgotten they're wearing one at all. He saw this clearly in the case of a high-powered lawyer who came to him feeling suffocated by life. Through their sessions, Jung helped her see something shocking. She had become so perfect at playing the role of successful lawyer that she had lost touch with who she was underneath. Her dreams were filled with images of being locked in a golden cage, a perfect symbol of how success itself had become her prison. The second key idea Jung discovered was the shadow, all the parts of ourselves we push away because they don't fit our idea of who we should be. Think of the straight-A student who never allows themselves to be messy, the kind person who never expresses anger, or the tough businessman who never shows vulnerability. Jung found that the harder we try to lock away these rejected parts of ourselves, the more trapped we are. One of Jung's most fascinating cases involved a priest who came to him with crippling anxiety. Through their work together, the priest realized he had spent his entire life trying to be perfectly good, pushing away any sinful thoughts or feelings. But the more he tried to be perfect, the more anxious and trapped he felt. Only when he learned to accept his full humanity, including his darker impulse, did he finally find peace. The third and most powerful idea Jung developed was individuation, the process of becoming who you really are, not who you think you should be. This isn't just about being yourself in the shallow way we often talk about it. Jung found that true individuation requires facing all the parts of yourself you've been running from, including the parts that terrify you. He documented this through the story of a wealthy businessman who had recurring nightmares of being lost in a maze. Through working with Jung, this man realized he had spent his life following his father's path in banking, ignoring his deep love for music. The maze in his dreams represented how lost he was in a life that wasn't truly his. Only when he finally allowed himself to pursue music, not as a career, but as a vital part of his life, did the nightmares stop. Enveloped these ideas nearly a century ago, they're more relevant now than ever. Look at how we live today. We swipe through social media, comparing ourselves to carefully filtered lives, jump from job to job searching for fulfillment, and follow endless self-improvement trends promising to fix us. Jung would say, we're doing exactly what makes us feel more trapped, trying to escape ourselves instead of understanding ourselves. Take the modern obsession with finding your passion. Jung would have seen right through this. He'd point out how this pressure to discover your one true calling often just creates another cage. His research showed that real freedom doesn't come from finding the perfect path, but from understanding why you feel so desperate to find it in the first place. Or consider how many people today feel trapped in what they call imposter syndrome. Jung saw this coming. When everyone presents a perfect image online, we feel even more pressure to hide our real struggles. One of his modern followers treated a social media influencer who seemed to have it all. Millions of followers, brand deals, constant travel. But in private sessions, she revealed she felt like a fraud because she couldn't match the perfect image she'd created. She was trapped by her own success. The hustle culture of today would have fascinated Jung. He'd see our obsession with productivity and optimization as a modern form of what he called possession by the shadow. We're so possessed by the idea of constant improvement that we've lost touch with the natural rhythms of being human. No wonder we feel trapped. We're trying to turn ourselves into machines. But Jung's insights offer hope. He found that feeling trapped isn't a sign that something's wrong with you. It's often the first step toward becoming more authentically yourself, like the coding bootcamp graduate who felt trapped in his new high-paying tech job, only to realize this feeling was pushing him to integrate his love of teaching with his technical skills, eventually becoming a programming mentor who finally felt aligned with his true nature. Being trapped can seem like a prison sentence. Jung shows us it's actually a beginning, not an end. His work reveals a surprising truth. That sensation of being stuck, of suffocating in your own life, isn't a malfunction in your psychological system. It's your psyche working exactly as it should, trying to wake you up to something important. Remember the businessman trapped in his banking career who kept having maze dreams? His story didn't end with him dramatically quitting his job to become a musician. Instead, he found freedom by incorporating music into his life in a meaningful way, playing piano in the evenings and joining a local choir. This is what Jung discovered over and over. Real freedom often doesn't look like what we imagine. Sometimes the cage door has been unlocked all along. We just needed to see it differently. Jung found that the people who feel most trapped are often the ones closest to a breakthrough. It's like being in a dark room. The more your eyes adjust, the more you can see what's really there. The feeling of being trapped is often just the first step in seeing your life more clearly. Sometimes what feels like a prison is actually a cocoon, a necessary space for transformation.